Hello, hypothetical audience, and welcome to some hazy cosmic jive. I'm JJNW'S Ghost, and for today's jive, I wanted to go back to 1998 and talk about a show called Serial Experiments Lain. Now, I don't remember when I was first introduced to Lain. I'd estimate probably about 7 or 8 years ago. I was aware of its reputation as a cyberpunk anime with various different gosh, I sound like Charles Barkley, with various different interpretations as to both its themes and its overall plot. I was mostly interested in it because it had the same head writer as Digimon Tamers. Now, a far cry from Digimon Adventure, Tamers starts innocent enough, with an uncomfortable moment here or there before devolving into a full-on horror show for its final arc. I remember loving that as a kid, and I did rewatch it. I believe it was last year, the year before, with Clay, and it still holds up really well. Now, I watched Lain when I was first aware of it, and it didn't do much for me. I do remember feeling uncomfortable when I would walk near a power line and, I would hear that telltale hum. But that's one of the only things I took from the show, aside from Let's All Love Lain and the opening, which is a certified banger. But a couple weeks ago, a few friends of mine started watching Lain, and their conversations and enthusiasm for it convinced me to give it a rewatch. And, of course, I wanted to talk about my experience. So what I decided to do is take notes for every episode while I'm watching them about what sticks out to me. And then I want to make a short video just about each individual episode and my experience with it. I want to go over things like the basic plot, if there's any particular shots that really stood out to me, and what are the major themes that I'm picking up on from each individual episode and how they contribute to the larger themes of the whole narrative. So, without further ado, let's log in to Serial Experiments Lain. Layer 05, Distortion. Lain spends the first few minutes speaking to a disembodied voice, identifying itself as God. God discusses how humanity is stagnated in terms of evolution and seeks nothing but fulfillment of its own flesh. The Wired is now the only hope for human evolution. After that conversation, Lain then starts talking to her dolls and asks them to tell her stories, including one that looks like Alice. Not her friend Alice, but actually Alice from Wonderland Alice. And she starts talking about a prophecy, but then doesn't really elaborate. The next major scene is Mika leaving her boyfriend's house and finding Lain standing in the middle of a street, while the cars are actively going by. Mika watches her sister for a little bit before pulling a Tobey Maguire and deciding that it's not her problem. Lain's face then appears on a large monitor and looks down on her sister with this detached but also somewhat disappointed expression. We then hear a report that the traffic systems were hacked, which led to a fatality. My best understanding from both what I saw in the episode and just kind of reading a few comments online is that Mika is the person who died. She was put into some kind of illusion with her seeing Lain in the middle of the street, and then she decided to not care about her little sister. Lain was watching Mika's reaction to see what she would do, and then made an executive decision. She then hacked the traffic controls and got her sister killed in an accident, which sent her sister into the Wired. Now, we know from the first episode that someone can enter the Wired after they die, or at least a part of their consciousness can. Mika starts seeing the phrase fulfilled a prophecy everywhere, from being written in blood to written in her coffee. She freaks out every time she sees it and returns home, only to find another Mika, because Lain replaced her with a better sister. And then on top of getting replaced, she gets full-on deleted at the end of the episode. Now, Lain's mom has a line about the body being only a shell, and that the Wired is actually reality. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, But we've certainly seen by this point in the show just how much influence The Wired has over reality and how much it can change it. There's another conversation about how God exists in The Wired and is strong enough to influence the rest of the world, and I think that's what we see in Mika's implied death, which I think is all evidenced by, or which is all supported by Mika's implied death, her kind of existing in this purgatorial state in The Wired for a bit, and then being full-on deleted. It honestly made me think a lot about of the modern influence of the internet. We have things like the Arab Spring, which was heavily fueled by social media, as well as the prosecution of Ahmaud Arbery's murderers. Yet we also see things like the overabundance of cancel culture or cyberbullying. And I'm really getting the vibe that Serial Experiments Lain isn't necessarily a warning against technology and that, oh no, it's bad, it's too strong, it shouldn't be used, but is more just about understanding it. That this is something that can be used, whether it's used for good, whether it's used for bad. It is powerful, and if you don't understand that and don't respect it, you might be on the wrong side of it. Now, we'll definitely see if that vibe continues, because I don't feel like we've really seen The Wired be used for good things at this point. I mean, I think in the last episode, it was used that got a kid killed, but we'll see how it progresses, or if by the end of the show it's like, no, this is all a warning about how the internet is like this evil entity. Laird 06. Kids. Lane's computer setup has been getting larger and larger with each episode. And in this one, it honestly looked like the lab from the beginning of Mewtwo Strikes Back. And the grin on her face while she's at the computer, it's a bit creepy. And again, it's just showing how consumed she is by The Wired. And her dad is watching her, and it's made very clear that he isn't too keen on his daughter's new obsession, but that he also still can't do anything about it. We see Lain inside The Wired having a conversation with the Knights, and it seems that she's on good terms with them, even though we don't hear what they're saying to her. I noticed that in this scene, Lain is surrounded by the color white, and she's also wearing white. As I've said in previous episodes, I feel like in this show, the color white is really symbolizing loneliness. And I feel like this is a scene that can be argued as either supporting that idea or going against it. It could be going against it because, well, Lain isn't alone. She's having conversations, and she seems to be enjoying both herself and the company. However, it can be supporting that white equals loneliness because it's seemingly a one-sided conversation. We get these distorted sounds and maybe like a brief image, but that'll be it. It feels more like Lain is imagining having a conversation with someone else to keep herself entertained or even to keep herself from going insane. It's kind of something akin to Tom Hanks creating Wilson in Castaway. We also later will see Lain talking to her friends, and while she does seem a lot more confident and affable, she also makes it clear that she would rather be at home working on her computer or inside The Wire than spending time with them. It's just more evidence of Lane's evolution as a character and the way The Wire has influenced her. Now for the plot of this episode. Lain sees children looking up at the sky with their arms outstretched. I wasn't sure if they were doing the salute the sun thing from Dark Souls or if they were offering up their power for a spirit bomb. But then the sky opens up and it reveals this image of Lain that other people can see, and with her being on top of the clouds with the light behind her, she looks almost divine, and it gives the impression that the children are actually worshiping her. Now she does some digging to figure out what it is that the kids are doing, and learns that this Sigmund Freud looking guy was doing experiments on kids and their psi energy, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but it's spelled the exact same way as the stuff from Earthbound. The experiment went wrong and the kids died. The professor hid his experiment away the best he could to prevent it from ever being repeated, but apparently it has been leaked online, and it is heavily rumored that the people that leaked it were the Knights. And so the kids holding out their arms in public, I guess, is the way that they're replicating the experiment. And the episode ends with a bomb planted by the Knights going off in Lane's room, and the Men in Black revealing that they are not the Knights, they are a separate entity. The main takeaway I got from this episode is that the internet is a dangerous place for children. Now, we've seen that in a previous episode, where a kid was shot due to a couple games getting mixed. But this one in particular has child deaths being a major plot point. In a similar vein, Lane looks a lot more adult inside the Wired in this episode. She's got earrings, wearing lipstick, and her outfit just seemed to look a lot more professional, at least a lot more so than the bear hoodie we got in the first episode. I like the subtlety here of the Wired making kids grow up quickly, especially with all of the things we can find on the internet now, like from violence to porn. There's also maybe ever so slightly the idea of kids being raised by the Wired more than being actually raised by their family, which you could definitely argue is something we see with how powerless Lane's parents are over her. Now, given the divine image of Lane, the experiments, and the bomb, it seems that what the Knights wanted to do was to use their latent powers to project an image of God into reality. But since Lane is highly revered in the Wired, she was the one that ended up getting projected instead of the actual god of the Wired that the Knights are supporting. It seems that the Knights, based on that weird one-sided conversation they had with Lane, is that they were okay with her so long as she, didn't really pose a threat to them. But once they realized that she was becoming their actual god, they decided to get rid of her. I don't remember how things get settled between them in the show, but I am looking forward to seeing how this conflict ends up playing out.